Alright, welcome back again. Mark Sargent here, and we're going through animation in Blender, the basics, setups, and other things. Okay, so here we go. This is our little cube, which was great, but there are many better options. And first of all, just because animation can be a little bit confusing regarding to the axis, I will create a ball, and then I will create a monkey head. Alright, so Shift-I, and M and U is a UV sphere, and function key 9 to see the actual size. The scene is set to meters. This is the default, but it's way too large, so I will set it to 0.1. That means the diameter of this little guy is set to about 20 centimeters. Okay, so that would be nice. And the monkey now, so Shift-I and M. And of course, the monkey is fairly oversized compared to the ball, so let me reduce it to 0.2 and push it aside. Now, I like to use this gizmo, and before we start, you should know that by default, the animation start animation hotkey is the spacebar, which one I really don't like. It's confusing for me with other softwares. So it's switching up. So when I'm pressing the spacebar, that brings the toolbox. If I'm pressing shift space, that is actually playing animation. But if you want to adjust it, you can go to edit preferences. And as usual, if we are looking for a key map, we are looking for a function, and the function is play animation. And here we go, this is a top one. So if you click in here, and it will allow you to press a key and assign it. In your case, it will tell just spacebar. I will switch it to shift spacebar. And in comparison, because we are switching different to existing keyboards, we can make an adjustment. So toolbar, and toolbar here, and spacebar is the other part of the switch. All right, so just a side note, if you are confused by the pop-ups, this is why it makes the change. Okay, so we have the monkey. It shows the front direction, and right click shade smooth, and on the ball right click shade smooth as well. So this ball will be animated. Now we are in the 2D layout mode, the standard layout mode, and of course we have an animation layout. But before we are jumping to the animation layout, let me show you the basics of this whole thing. So right now our output is set to 24 frame per second, and we have a starting frame at 1 and the closing frame at 250. Which one is an overkill? So let me just reduce it to about 60. Now it reduces this active zone, and it's barely visible, but if I lift this up, you will see that we have this little light gray area, and that shows the actual working part, but still the timeline is overly oversized. And what you need to know that most of the keys that you are using in the viewport are active in the timeline and graph editor and dope sheet. So for example, fit in and zoom and other parts are working very similar, but we will discuss that later on. Okay, so this is the animation timeline, and a few more things. So what's the main difference between the layout and the animation work space? We have a camera assigned, and we have the timeline, and on top of the time we have an additional window, and that is the dope sheet. Now we have a third one, that's the graph editor, and we will switch between dope sheet and graph editor by pressing Control and Tab. Control and Tab, it's going back and forth, it's like a toggle. The problem with this layout, and especially if you don't have that much screen space, is the orientation of the camera. It's consuming way too much space. So what I like to do, and it's a suggestion, especially if you're not really interested at camera first, you can just resize this. This is one thing. But if you have an ongoing animation and you have a set and proper camera, then you may want to hold down Shift key, drag the corner, and it will tear this window, duplicate and tear. And now you can actually just create let me grab the corner of it, a tiny window. And of course you can drag here and consume that space as well. So now we have a main window We can use these sidebars, which one is really handy, and of course a toolbar that indicates and shows what I'm actually selecting, or sometimes just it's an easier way to click on things if you're not using hotkeys all the time. All right, so this is the layout modification I like to use with animation. It gives some flexibility, and of course I can move it away. If you have another monitor, you can do this as well. All right, so here we go, and this ball wants to bounce. I'm not using auto key now, I'm using a manual keying. So the first thing is using the toolbar and using the transform gizmo. Let me lift this up. We are on frame 1. So if you are not sure about this, you can always check it or go in here and type in 1. And of course you can drag this slider as well, so that works as well. But by default, be careful because the animation starts at 1. All right, which one is not that bad. Some people like it, some people don't, but we can go with it. All right, so at the first frame, this ball should start somewhere here. We have to make our animation key. Now, if we press I, it will bring you the insert keyframe menu, and we can choose what we want to record. Now, in this case, because this is just a bounce without any rotation, scale, or anything else, we can go and set location. Now we have an animation key appearing. Now this is the dope sheet. This key there's nothing important at this stage happening because there's no real action. This is just a kind of a foundational initial pose where the animation starts. So let me go to let me zoom in first. So I'm using the middle mouse scroll wheel to zoom. The middle mouse press down, that's actually a pan, so you can make this happen in the window as well. And what's next? About 10. I will drop it to the floor. Okay, so going down, and of course you can accurately make this change by you going in here and pressing 0.1. Okay, why? Because the diameter of this whole thing, the radius is 0.1. So if you make that happening here, this means it's touching the grid right now. Okay, so that's how I know. If you see the colors, we have greens. That means those channels are animated. We have a change, and this is why it's not green, because at this location we have something updated. Now if we want to make an actual key, and let me show you the difference. So here we have this original situation where we have these light colored greenish stuff, and at the 10th, now I'm lost the key because I'm not marked it. There is this different color. If I press I here, that's basically very much the same thing that you press I here in the viewport and choose location. But because you're already at location, if you press I, it will generate the key for you, which one is great. Now, what type of keys we have? This one is an automatic Bezier clamped curve that's symbolized with this round thing. And if we are opening this up, we have X location, Y, and Z location animating in the dope sheet. Now you see this orange stuff in here that symbolizes no change. So that's the indicator of no change. What does it mean? This ball is moving only up and down. Now the up and down has a color code. Okay, it's not visible here in the dope sheet, but if you press Ctrl Tab and progress on the other direction and go to the graph editor, by the way, you can always let me just drag this away. So you can always go to dope sheet, timeline, graph editor, and these hotkeys are also working, but Ctrl Tab is the neat way to change things up. And in dope sheet, in graph editor, we have another luxury, and that is the color coding of the various axes. All right, so that's how that helps a lot. Now this is the Z axis. We are animating on the blue direction, and it shows that we have a change. Now this is barely visible for the eye. What we can do is holding down Control and a middle mouse button and zoom in like a stretch in regarding to the length. This is the time axis, by the way. or up and down, and that increases the amplitude of this whole thing. Now this will give you a little bit better visual feedback on what is actually happening. All right, so the ball is dropping to the 0 or somewhat close to 0 because we are animating the center of this thing, and that's fine. Now let me go to about the 18th frame and lift this up. This is a little bit shorter amount of time, quite a lot. Let me lift this up and go in here and press I, and what you can see is this ball is dropping down and then lifting up, but the next time when I'm lifting this up, the height is a little bit lower. Okay, it could be even more lower. And because I'm using manual keying now, there's no automatic response to this change. So this is why the color indicates here. I have to go in, or again in the viewport, choose location, and now the key is marked, it's recorded, so we are good to go. All right, let me go to the next frame. And this is the frame where I want to land the ball again. And again, I can do it manually, go in here, go to the front viewport and eyeball it. Okay, is it the right space or not? I can go in here and type, or what else? Of course, we can copy. So let me select this key, Ctrl C, and where the 2D cursor of this, we should say time slider, but it's not time slider in here because it's more than a time slider. Let me press Ctrl V. And now this key is pasted, and also the properties of the key is pasted. So this is a Bezier, clamped curve, simple curve key. This one works fine. Okay, now what else? Of course, we can go and lift this up again, and we can actually check the values. Or if you like to operate with values, we can go to View and Show Sliders. And that was actually showing the sliders here. Okay, so if you like it, this was also a pretty neat thing if you're looking for feedback. So here we are now, it's 0.4. This was starting from 0.64. So here, maybe 0.3 will be neat enough. And I can just walk down and it shows, and then hit I. And now we have the keys animated. I can even go in here, hit I, and that will record the change. So this is one thing that we can do. And of course, again, Ctrl C and Ctrl V. If some case, okay, we had a selection going on. So Ctrl C and Ctrl V. And that's it. So let me show, because the record keys is covering the area. All right, so let me start and play the animation. This is, in my case, it's shift spacebar. If you're using the default keys, it is just the spacebar. All right, this is a little bit of an odd movement because of the keying. Before I explain that, let me show you something. If you press Control and spacebar, or Control and Shift spacebar, in my case, the playback is reversed. All right, so again, this is working pretty neat if you want to go back. If we are using the arrow keys, arrow left will go left, right will go right. If you hold it down, it will actually play the animation. It's not exactly the same phenomenon, but it's really close to the normal playback. The other thing is, if you're holding down the shift key and using left and right arrows, it will go to the start of the time segment and to the end of the time segment. More than that, if you want to make corrections or just quickly make a review on the keys, we can go with the up and down arrow keys, and this is going back and forth between the animated keys. All right, so that is quite a neat stuff to be used. Okay, now we can, of course, if we have multiple keys selected and we want to have a closer inspection, we can use the numpad dot to zoom on to the selected keys. And of course, we can zoom and hold down again the Control and middle mouse technique to zoom and stretch things to deal with other parts. Okay, here we have this normalize button, and we don't have any more segments yet. However, we have animations on these tracks as well. Okay, now let me just give some more room to this. All right, so these tracks will also receive animation, right? So the keys are there, but there's no change. All right, so if you go back, here it is. There's no change at all because the keys are nothing. Nothing is different. Nothing is updated. But you can use them and select them. The normalize is actually what it does. It masks the curves and make them somewhat digestible in the same window. Okay, so that helps a lot. It places everything at somewhat same location, adjusts the sizes, the amplitudes to match somehow, and this is a great help if you are working with multiple curves at the same time. All right, so that is about normalize. Now, how make this bounce a little bit better? Okay, because it's just fairly odd. All right, it's like a piston, and it's a sinus type of movement and not really a bounce. So what we have to do, we have to think of the energy. So what happens, the ball falls down, it may accelerate. So when we are here, it goes faster and faster, but this speed is continuous and it never stops until it reaches the floor. So what we have to do, we have to make this constant by using a different key handle type. So if you select the key and press V, you can choose from the various handle types. Now, mostly it is vector and auto-clamped, but that's personal preference as well. So right now, vector, what it does, it looks for the origin, looks for the direction of the curves, and it's coming in and leaving the point, and this generates this nice little adjusted vector sharp change. Okay, so I will do the same thing here. V vector, there we go, and now playing the animation, and this will be a lot different. Okay, I think it's a little bit slow, so we have to deal with that as well. But before I do, maybe an additional bounce could be fine. Now, to clean up this thing, we will have to check how much it bounces up and back and forth. Now, the maximum is about 97% for an average ball. This is not a bouncy ball, this is an average ball. If it goes about 50-60%, that's kind of a neat thing. So what does it mean? If we have a value of 1 here, this should be 0.5. If we have a 0.5, this should be a little bit lower. And this is where I recognize the pattern. So this height is, I think it's too much. Now here's something that commonly happens, that we have this little dot and it's in the way, it's hard to select the keys. There's another key that's a little bit disturbing. So what I will do, I will turn off the visibility of the tracks or the channels, if you may call them that way. And it's easier to select the things. You can also lock them, but it's not a necessity at this stage. So here we are, and selecting by pressing G, you can do the same moving thing. And if you press Z, for example, that is about the Z-axis constraint. So we can go down without worrying too much. And maybe 1 frame to the left on the X-axis. And also this one should be a little bit off. And this one as well, 1 more. Okay. So that is a little bit better. Alright, so there we are. Let me play this, drops, and go down. And now, I'm a lazy person. Most of us are. And we'll select these 2 keys, Ctrl C, going up, opposite other direction, and Ctrl V, and paste both of them, and it will continue this whole stuff. Alright, so that's the main idea about this. And of course, it's not perfect. You have to make the corrections. Lower this mouse and just move these a little bit off, and G and moving on the X-axis. Great. Okay, so there we are. We have a couple bounces. Now, what about the speed? Because it's slow. So what to do? First of all, what you have to recognize that this pattern is somewhat similar in all areas. If not, that's purely my imperfection. So this arc is somewhat scaled down. So what does it mean? This direction is the time. So if it's shorter, this direction, this distance between the two keys, that means it's happening faster. And the other thing is the travel. So the up and down value is defining how much it bounces back up. All right. So if it bounces less, it travels less. So it happens a little bit in a shorter amount of time. So that's what we do. Now, how to scale? If I'm selecting all the keys, I can press A, and that will select all the keys. And AA will deselect the keys, which was really it's a known feature of Blender, but it works as well here. If I'm pressing S, it will scale in a uniform way, which one is just really not working for us now. Yeah, I can make a restriction, so I can press S and X to restrict the scaling, but it's just scaling in one. It's scaling regarding to the center of the selection. Okay, so the center of the bounding box of the selection, to be precise on this. Now, this could be an issue if you want to stretch time in a curve editor. What you can do is go in here and choose 2D cursor. And 2D cursor is basically split into two parts. You have a vertical, that's the time slider type of thing, and we have a horizontal cursor. So these are helping us. Now we have the whole thing selected, and I'm going back to the very first frame because this will be the root of our scale. Press S now. Now the scaling is happening right there at that place. But if I'm pressing S and X, I can just scale it on the x-axis. All right. So now there is some scale. Let me play the animation and see what it makes, how it looks. And it's a kind of believable bounce for the ball. Okay. All right, what else? So we already know that if we press V, we can choose and select different type of keys. Now this is auto clamped, and the bottom keys are vector keys. And if we are going to the dope sheet, in the dope sheet, we can see that these little indicators are showing that these keys are different in nature. So let me go. And one thing that you need to know now, that we still have the keys existing on the X and Y locations. So these keys are there, and we haven't moved or scaled these keys. So these keys are just not really playing in a game yet. These are just created because we have animated all of the tracks, right? So that's what's happening. Now, what else we should know? The interpolation type could be adjusted. And here's one thing that I will do. I will quickly create and copy these. Ctrl C, go in here and press Ctrl V. Because I need these keys to make a little change in the interpolation. T is the hotkey for keyframe interpolation, and we have quite a few things. These are speed related, so how the things start to traveling or slowing down. This is the in general type of a curvature, and these are the dynamic effects that you can use to speed up your workflow. So in here we will use the bounce, and what bounce does, and please note that it's not the last key. It's happening between the last key and this key, the last before. So then you can see that these are the arcs I was talking about, but this is automatically generated, and you can fine tune with the position. So you can fine tune these arcs with the position of the key. Okay, I will go with this, and maybe here a little bit of a nicer arc should be there. Okay, so let me see what it does. So it will add a little bit more bounces in the end. Yeah, there we go. Okay, nice. Now here is this little thingy, and what we want to do is actually we want to make a copy of it and animate it a different way. Now this little practice, it's not necessarily the standard way. You're not really always copying existing animations. But when you do this, you need to recognize how to handle the keys, because keys playing an important role, and it will make your model stick to the original position. Okay, and it's happening a lot of times. All right, so let me press Shift D and move it on the x-axis, move it aside, and this will be a whole little different thing. Okay, just to make sure that we can easily differentiate, I will change colors just a second. But right now I have a bigger issue. This one, as you see, the location key is updated. I'm on frame 1. Alright, so frame 1, the key is updated. I moved it away about 0.4 meters, that's 40 centimeters. And but there's no key yet, so I'm going in here and press I to make sure I have a key there. And if I'm playing the animation, this is what happens. So they start separate, but then this little ball is going back to the original position. Why? Because each moment when we press I or set a key, this sphere received an animation on other axis as well. So what I will do to clean up the thing, and this is what's happening. So it starts off, and then it goes back to 0 value, and changing up the location. And normalize is turned on for us. This is why we don't see that, but this is 0 value, this is 0.4. So there we go. If I move this back, you can see that this is now 0.4, and that's it. All right, let me go to normalize again. So if you don't see the values or something is confusing with the values, this is what's happening, because these are just mapped, projected, interpolated, or superimposed. Superimposed over the same coordinate system. All right, now what to do? Let me turn off the Z location, because we don't want to mess up that, and select all these keys. Now, here's something that you need to know of. You are selecting the keys, but the handles will show up. So this little pattern, it doesn't mean you have so many keys selected. It means you have keys, and each key has 2 additional marker that symbolizes the handles. So what I will do, there's a hotkey. If you press Ctrl H, it will hide away the handles. Okay, so when I'm selecting this one, hide away, showing. All right, so this is a great help, but you have to know and you have to use it consciously. All right, so let me press delete those keys, and going back to the locations. Now the location is clean. We have only one key at the beginning, and this is bouncing freely. All right, perfect. Now how to make them a little bit different. What I will do, select the first model and going to the properties and viewport display, and changing the color to maybe a kind of a green ball as a starting ball, and make sure that this is actually appearing. So an object, and of course this is the basic ball. This will be a medicine ball. For that, we'll choose a little bit darker color, brownish, more heavier look. So there we are. And this one is invisible because already we have turned on object. If you don't want to do that, you can choose random. It will assign a random color to this thing, so it can help a lot if you don't want to confuse parts. But this is a great help. So this is the med ball, the brownie one. Okay, so what I want to change up, the med ball is bouncing a little bit different. All right, so this one has plenty of energy, but this will be a little bit different. So what to do is, let me show the Z location. We have cleared up the X and Y, and I will turn this off now. I don't want to get confused. And the first thing that I will do is, honestly, I'm deadly sure that it will not be that bouncy in the end. All right, I will even delete this one, and because it has a lot of weight, and this is a soft material, it is just consuming energy and turn it into a transformation. So there's some kind of an elastic loss, there's some kind of a friction loss, there's not much air drag because it's a high density. So what we have to take care of is mainly the deformation, which one we will skip for now, but we will definitely reduce the bounce back. Okay, so I can select these guys, actually use S and scale on the Z axis, the Y axis. Yeah, but we have a different -1. So let me go with the cursor, -1s, and on the y-axis, and scale it down. All right. So let me go. It bounces back. Even this is too much, so scale it even more in here. It's like a puff. So it's going down, and yeah, and that's it. And here, this should be even lower. And here's the zoom thing that don't forget, you don't have to watch all these very flat curves. So depending on the task, you can just emphasize, and it will be much easier to tune. Okay, now I'm just fighting with this pop-up. All right, so G and Z axis, moving it down a little bit. G and on the X axis, G and X. Okay, there we go, and see what it does. All right, so let me play this. Yeah, that's it. So for a menacing ball without the scaling and transformation, this one is pretty good. So what you see here, from the existing, you can separate the delete keys, and when you change the overall timing of the stuff and overall distance, it has a great effect on the behavior and the look, and it's quite influential. Okay, now what else? We can make a bit more interesting thing, and that will be a beach ball. Now, how to do that? First of all, let me start over and create a new file just for practice. So just to learn the setup again. Let me stop this animation now and start for a new. All right, so just quickly. All right, so setting up the beach ball animation. Of course, we have to delete this cube. We are working in centimeters, Shift-I and U as a UV sphere, and the radius will be 0.2. That means 40 centimeters in the diameter, which was a decent size for a beach ball. Segments and rings are the same, so that is fine. Okay, so let me make a lookup and go to edit mode. And before edit mode, we can just apply a new color to this, a new material and color. So bold and main, that would be the main thing, and the base color, that should be about maybe a greenish tone. All right, that's fine. And we want to make sure that this is actually visible here. All right, so this is a green over half. And now go to edit mode and press number 3 because we want to select a couple faces. Go to the top view, numpad 7, holding down Alt key and clicking on closer to these edges. Then that is selecting a stripe of polygons. And because I want to add more stripes to it, I'm holding down Alt key from now on and Shift and add every second pair. So skip 2 and add, skip 2, add, skip 2, add, and there we go. All right, here we are. Now we are creating a new material slot, and in a new material slot down will be ball and stripe. And because we have a pending selection, we can hit on assign. And now, if we change the color, which one is better? I think the bluish tone was better. All right, so now we are good. We can leave that mode. And of course, right click and shade smooth. And that's kind of a beach ball. And when we are actually rotating this ball, that will be much visible. And also it's easier to find errors or something or similar things. Now, before we start animating this, I don't think the orientation is perfect. So let me go to the toolbar and the transform. So again, if you have switched, this is space or shift space, depending on your setup. Let me go back to the first frame. And I want to change the location, but to make sure that the location change, the orientation change is good, I will create a monkey again. So the monkey is always helping us to know where this whole scene is facing. Alright, so function key 9 and 0.4 meters. This was a little bit larger, moving it aside, and of course right click shade smooth, and this is just really bright, so I will create I will leave it as it is. So here we are. This is the ball, and what I want to do is I want to rotate on this green axis. So start rotating, and holding down control is helping me to make sure that this value at the very top left, this value is showing 90 minus or positive 90 change. So here we are. Now the sphere is rotated, set in size, and this will be good. But before you do any animation, make sure that you have applied the changes so you can start fresh. Now here, because this rotation was introduced, that can cause some troubles in the animation tracks. Just like anything else, it's much better if you make a habit of resetting your stuff. To reset, you have to go and apply, Control A to apply, and I will reset. Right now, basically I can reset everything because this ball sits in the origin, but some cases you want to reset only to rotation and other things. Now I'll go in all transforms, and there we are. Okay, and we can go to the animation layouts, make the change, or right away I can adjust the camera. I'm pressing 0 and opening up the sidebar and look for the view and camera lock and zoom in slightly, and maybe it will travel on this green axis, so it will jump there, and the monkey shows me that, so it will jump, and then I will be able to see how this thing is going. All right, now let me turn off camera. And of course, if we wish, we can create a floor to this, just to make it a little bit more fancy. So let me leave camera viewport and Shift A and P for a plane. And yes, you can lift up the ball, or you can leave it as it is and just cheat a little bit with the grid, with the plane. The reason I like to do this type of a thing is because the plane is not covering the grid as so the grid will be visible, which it could be a help, and you don't have to worry about the whole center thing. Okay, let me go back to the first, and a slight overlap is in my favor. Okay, so it's not perfectly touching. Which one is for reflections and shadows and other things. That could be interesting. There we are. And of course, we will stretch this out and move slightly because this little guy will travel on that axis. Okay, there we are. The camera should be turned off. And of course, I'm not curious about the light. And here's the plane. And the plane, if we don't want to select it, we can go to the filters and restriction here and restrict, and we are not able to select it. We can do the same with the Suzanne. So Suzanne we are not able to select it. The only thing we can select actually is the sphere itself. And again, Z, material preview, and here we can even go to Z and rendered and go to the camera. And I think rendering is now, the light is off, so I will go in material preview just for this. And make it a little bit smaller to not consume that much space. Okay, there we are. It's there, and here we work. Okay, so this little guy, I think that little guy needs some color because it just kills the vision. So that will be a plain color, and choose something that actually is a little bit more eye friendly. Okay, let me go with a color, a little bit of a darker tone. Oh, that's fancy. All right, so it's like a sandy little beach. Okay, there we are. And working on the animation, the first key we want to create an item, and lift this up And we can use auto key now, all right? So just to make things a little bit more interesting, I'm turning on auto key and lifting this up, and it starts from here. And now we have a key created, which was great. And of course, the overall time is a little bit too much, so I'll set it about 100. Yeah, because it's a beach ball, it will travel a little bit slower, so it needs more time to bounce. And it's not a bouncy thing, but it's a floaty thing, and air resistance makes it slower, and it can spend more time a little bit in the air compared to the previous two balls. Okay, so there we are. Object transfers, all the channels received a key. All right, it's a huge change, it's a big difference, so be careful with this, because auto key will create keys for all the stuff. All right. Okay, there we are. And now at maybe 20, it will drop down. So I will move it back in here and set this to 0, and it drops. Okay, key is created. Then at this, yeah, maybe 30, we are lifting this up. And I'm curious about the changes in here, so I'm going to normalize and see it for myself. And something interesting will happen. So it bounces pretty back up. So I don't think they need that much of a bounce back. Okay, time passes, and we are going back again to 0. So type in 0, and there we are. And now we have the key as well. And then going back and just lift this up slightly, and of course it's just way too much. And then we can actually copy this key and paste it on there, and there will be another little bounce. So it's bouncy, it's just not that much of a, there's just not that much of an energy. All right, it's a mixture of different features. And Ctrl V, because I recorded that key before. So Ctrl C, Ctrl V, there, and let me see what it does. So it bounces, yeah. So it falls really slow. It slows down, and of course, it's just not really believable if we are keeping these keys that way. So let me select, holding down Shift key, select these and V, and go to vector. So now these are vector type keys. Falling off, and then it just bounces a couple times. Okay, the first fall seems to be a little bit slow, so what I will do is I will select basically all the keys here and slide them GX on the x-axis a little bit, and that speeds up the first fall. And that is yeah, that's working. All right, and the last little bounce. There we are, and lifting this up, checking visually what it does, and going to the opposite direction, and reset. So if I'm correct, yeah, it's in the memory. So now we have a bounce, but of course we have to reduce the amount of bounce there. And this key, yep, it was suspicious. That was a copy that had the standard Bezier type of keying. Okay, so let me play the animation. Folding down, couple bounces, which was great. Okay, so there we are. I don't need to scale it, but remember, if you wish, you can select all the keys. Make sure that this is set to 2D cursor, and use S, and on the x-axis you can scale it up and down easily. Okay, so there we are. This is the first movement. What we want to do next? We want to do next is it's a travel. So what it does, where we are on a Y location. So how do I know? I'm looking for the color, and this is the direction I want to make that travel. And that travel is happening on each of the touches. So it would start flying. So I'm using the arrow keys. This is the first keyframe that we have, where the ball lands, and we want to make that sure that when this point uh, it approaches, the ball is already traveling about a meters. Okay, so how do I know there is this little gap? Now here's something that you need to be aware of. When you make this animation, we already have existing keys because we were using AutoKey, and it was generously created further keys. So what I will do is I will select all of these and Control H again to hide the the handles. So let me delete those, and now we have a nice flat curve. So we can go up forward and checking each landing position and make the changes and travel in the landing position. Now, this is one approach. Yes, you can do other things. You can do basically this. So what does it mean? It travels normally, okay, but the distance was just not enough. So I will just pull it a little bit more. Let me see if it travels, okay. So you can do something like this. The problem with that is the speed is changing. Every time this ball touches the ground, it loses energy. So you can't really make this kind of a straight path of this whole thing. So let me undo the changes and go back. And this is what happens. So this was the first 1 meter. Then the ball is going up. Okay. Then the ball is going up. Nothing happens. At the next landing, it's moving already, but the travel, the delta, the difference is not 2 meters. It's a little bit less. Okay. Key up in the air, touching the bottom again, and there's a little bit less travel as well. Okay, up in the air, touching the ground again, and there's even more less and subtle travel. And if we have another bounce, then we have the last thing, and that's also happening there. Okay, so here we are, and we still have another one. Hey, okay. So there's another tiny movement. Right, so let me go back, play the animation, so see what it does. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Can you see how it bounces a little bit off? Okay, we have to take care of it. Why? We have acceleration, and that acceleration is throwing things off a bit. All right, so because the speed is relatively even, it is just changing and decreases at the moment when this ball is transforming and transferring energy to the ground. So here we are, and let me turn off the other tracks. Okay, so this is what with Control H will help to see a little bit better the whole thing. So let me just move it there, and we have a kind of a ladder. So right now, what's the problem? The problem is this curviness. So instead of keeping this as it is, I will just I don't want to complicate my life with vector. We can choose an interpolation that's called a linear. So now we have this straight segment. So when the ball travels, it is much more believable and predictable and straightforward. It's not exactly true, of course, because we have air drag, but it's not that significant you have to deal with. So what it does, this from this one number, these blocks, this direction, this dimension represents the change in the distance. So if this is a little bit lower, that means it travels more during this period of time. And now, yeah, this is quite believable. But here, it's slowing down. So it's going and travels. I'm afraid that I was missing. Yeah, sorry. I need to select this key and make sure that this key is matching in position with this one. All right. And here we are. To make sure that we are not messing up the already corrected Z location, we can use the lock. And these keys could be used to play with the distance. All right, so it's moving, going there, and that's it. Okay, what a little bit odd, this height, that's a little bit too much. So what I have to do is unlock and go and lower this amount so it bounces. Okay, that's it. All right, that's kind of a draft for the beach ball. All right, now let me stop this and spice up things with rotation and squeeze, or not exactly squeeze because it's a little bit different situation, but we'll use scaling. Okay, so there's the ball, and we're starting from the first frame, and what we're looking for is rotation. So right now, we are looking for the rotational keys. Now, here's something that I want to address and deal with. So the Z location is the most important, and we can organize things by moving them up and down. So this will go to the top. This is the other thing that will I want to go a little bit higher. So Z location and Y location. This was not that important for me. It's not moving sideways. So I will go and move to the bottom. And we need a rotation. So the only rotation we are looking for will be actually the X rotation. Okay, so all the others, these want to move to the bottom. And of course we have scales, and we will work with scales, all of them. Now these are not used in here in this animation, so I'll create a right click and group the channels and double click and rename to not in range or not used. Okay, there we go. You can actually turn off or you can even delete the channel. It's not a permanent thing, but let me show that. So X location, for example, we don't want to deal with. Let me turn on the visibility and make sure we are not touching on other parts. And if I'm selecting all the keys and hit delete, that is actually deleting the track. But no problem, if you want to have your track back, anytime you go in here and press I, it will, I will just quickly do this, it will create a new track, and that was the X location that's just freshly created because of the key that was placed. All right, so that's how it goes. By default, it's only showing that was keyed. All right. And of course, if you are selecting, it seems to be quite obvious for now, but if you're selecting something, the related animation tracks will be visible. Okay, so there we are. The ball is moving, traveling. We want to make the rotation. But before we want to make the rotation, one thing you need to clean up. First of all, where is it? This is the Euler rotation. So in the Euler rotation, we have to select all the keys and make sure the rest of the keys, not the first one, the rest of the keys are deleted because they may hinder our work. Another thing is that right now, if I'm starting rotating this ball, the gizmo is not exactly following the changes I made. If we press the comma key, that is actually bringing up the pie menu for orientation, and I would choose local. So what does it mean? When I'm starting rotating this ball, the gizmo will actually show the true orientation of the ball and not the represented global orientation. So here we are. This is these are the sets basically what you can bring up here with the pie menu. Okay, let me hit escape. Now what's happening? I'm using the arrow keys. I don't really see any tracks, so turn them off, and I'm using the arrow keys. Okay, this is the first landing position, and I will rotate about 90 degrees. So start rotating, and auto key is on, and I'm looking in the very top. You know, this is the value I'm looking for at the very top left corner, and of course it's just way too much. 90 degrees. Now 90 degrees is a cheating here. Okay. This is because of the scaling. We don't have any ball rig. Ball rig can help you to animate more flexibly. Here, this is a kind of a trick where you can skip few things. but the principles will be the same basically, and I will explain why we do that when we are dealing with the scaling. Okay, so lifting this up, another touching point, there's another rotation, and this would be also about 90 degrees. Okay, if it's not perfect, it's not a big deal, but it should be close to 90. And from now on, that would be a little bit less restricted. So, and maybe about 40 degrees, and then going up and down, and that is about a few more, 10, 16, up and down, and that will be a little bit less. So it's losing energy a lot. Okay, and here's the curve that we have. Now again, this is a Bezier curve, which was great, but the type of movement, you have to understand a little bit the physics of this whole thing. So what's happening is we have an initial velocity and we have an initial rotation of the ball, so it's already rotating in the air for whatever reason, and as it rotates, it reaches a point. Now this rotation is not starting here, it's going with full energy. So here this point, I'm pretty sure that we need a vector type of point and make sure this is right away it starts rotating. And it is rotating till this point, but this point should be also a vector, and let me explain why. Rotates fully, and it doesn't slow down, but the ball is actually losing energy, and losing energy in the rotation slowing down as well. So what we have to do, we have to go with a vector type of point here, Ctrl H to show the handles, and this is what happens. So it's going fast and it's slowing down a bit, and when it reaches the point, it's almost stopping with the rotation. And then with the contact, it will start rotate again with a really high, not really high, but a higher speed. So it starts rotating again, and then it is again slowing down. So V, vector, and slowing down. Can you see the pattern that is forming? So we have like a cloud, a little bit of a fluffy thing going on. So V, vector, and there's a good initial speed because from the contact, it's picking up rotational energy. And then moving back. Okay, there we are. And here at the last, yeah, we should use a simple clamped stuff. So we are gaining speed. Now, be careful because if you're overdoing this is what's happening. So it's rotating forward and then rotating backwards. And it may happen, so let me just play the animation and look how it behaves. So let me click away and just simply play the animation, and that's a little bit of odd movement. So we have some simple rotation, and then the ball itself is speeding up a little bit in the rotation. So let me just make this happening. All right, so there we are. Drop, drop, drop. Okay. Right. Now, how to make the kind of a cushion, how to make the stretch on the bottom. Now we have constraints, we can create rigs for that, which was great, but I just want to show you the principles and a little bit of a trick that can help you out, especially when you have a more complex shape, honestly, to check the volume of your object. All right, so we want to preserve the volume, which was a great principle in animation, so we want to make that happening. So what's going on here? The first thing is we need scale back on, and we don't want to keep all the scaling informations. The first keyframe is good if we have that, but let me select all the keyframes and hit delete. And now this is kind of a neat way to start. And using the arrow key, and this is the position of the contact. Now, in the contact, I want to change the contact and make an impact, and to make it more contrasty, I will go back with one keyframe and go in here at the scale and press I to create a keyframe. There's no change here, so it's still 1, but we have now a keyframe for the eye. And then I'm going to the contact point where I want to stretch on this axis now. So 0.9, I think I will go a little bit lower, 0.8. And now we have this little stretch in the things. And of course I can go back. Yeah, here we are. This is the arrow key. So that's it. But the problem is, because I've reduced the scaling only on one dimension, I'm losing volume. How do I know how much I lose? How can I check it? We have an add-on. This was already presented here, but let me show where it is. So preferences, and we have the add-ons, and this is called 3D print. 3D print. Oh yeah, it's my fault. 3D and print. So this is the toolbox. If you just check it, it will give a tab for you here. And what it does, there you are. What it does, if you click on volume, it will calculate the volume of the ball. So this is the recent volume. I'm using the arrow key, going back one frame where I have this animated thing. Okay. So here we are with the object properties. We can see the values here. So we can eyeball it here and still be able to use the 3D print stuff. Now I'm checking the volume. So it's 0.33. Okay, so 33. This is the key thing that I'm looking for. And using the arrow key, this is the contact point. This is where the ball should be a little bit stretched. And if I'm checking the volume, it's way too low. So what I'm doing is I'm increasing the volume. But here's my camera. So please keep that in mind. It's also a design question. So how much of the change will be visible for the camera? So instead of using most of the x-axis, I will stretch it on the y-axis and choose volume. And actually it's pretty neat, pretty much there. I will just dial back a little bit and maybe stretch it on this section as well. And that's pretty much spot on. So let me go to the camera and use my keyframes. And this is a high contrast, so I can see visually, easily see that we have this little thing. Okay, let me go one frame forward. And now I will use and simply just type in 1 and 1 and 1. So we are gaining back our original shape. All right. So what we do is if we are playing this, it will just touch and then bounce back. Okay. So it's like a cushion. All right. Let me click away, go in here and just play the animation. So starts, bounce, and then going forward. Okay, it's not that big of a bounce, but it is really present. Okay, this type of bounce is not always there, but we have another more. So this is bounces fairly big, and then there here at this landing position, we should have another little bit of a scale. Okay, so let me go there, check this using the keyframe tools. So this is a technique. This is the landing point. I'm going back one frame, make an animation key, landing point, one frame forward, and just to speed things up here, I'm making another point, then going in between to the landing. And because we have rotated 90 degrees, and that was the reason to rotate 90 degrees, to make sure that these handles are positioned well. Because if these are not positioned well, for example, let me just quickly create, so turn off the auto key, Shift A, MU, and just move this guy away. And if this is rotated in the 3D space, and you want to squash it from top direction, you cannot really do it with the simple scaling. You can do it with the lattice, you can do it with bones, but whatever. But if we are just talking about the basics principles, you have to be aware of the axis. All right. So if I want to scale this, I can scale it only this direction and not from up and down. This is why I was cheating and rotating this ball by 90 degrees to make sure the orientation of this whole thing will land on here. Let me turn back on auto key. So this is the initial pose, contact pose, and the last one. Okay, so go back to contact pose and now make the change. All right, so this is not much of a change. So if we want to make a fine tune, we can use the shift key, don't forget. And yeah, so to start moving, holding the shift key, it allows me to really accurately make the changes. So holding shift key, volume. Oh, that's fine. All right, so and now to key, because it was now turned on, we have this second bounce. First stretch is a little bit more intense. This is a little bit subtle, and then I will not really make any more because it's not necessary to show that. It's already believable if you have the main few bounces. So let me play this. Flies off, bounce, bounce, and there we are. Okay, that's it.